Good evening. I'm David Douglas. As many of you know, I'm the president of Effective Law Enforcement for All, ELEFA, and we're serving as the independent evaluator under the settlement agreement. How many of you first met us at one of the public interview meetings during the selection process? Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're back. First, we want to say thank you to the city of Minneapolis for the vote of confidence you've placed in us to do this important work. This is not only our assignment, it really is our mission. We are proud and privileged to have been selected to do it. We are committed to doing this work. We are compassionate to this kind of change process. It is our hope not only that is our commitment not only that we achieve the goals of this agreement, but we believe that Minneapolis can be a model for the nation. And let's face it, in the coming years, that may be more important than ever. We have a lot to do tonight, so you'll see we even dispensed with the traditional title slide that says really nothing. We don't have time to make introductions of each of our team members, but they're there on the slide. I hope you've met some of them before this meeting, and we'll be hanging out after the meeting. So we budgeted this for 2 hours, but we have the place till 9. We budgeted for 2 hours. We have a lot of information to share with you. And we have some feedback we're going to want from you, and we know you have some questions and feedback for us. So it's a lot to do. So this slide simply grounds this meeting. Under the settlement agreement, we are required to hold public meetings every 4 months to report to all of you on our work. Our approach, this time at least, is to have a meeting tonight here, and then we'll do another meeting in North Minneapolis so that we cover the city, and the agreement requires us to move them around. So we'll be having them in different locations so that it's convenient for different parts of the city to attend these. We definitely would like as much attendance as possible, so we'll get the word out. We already have dates for our March meeting, which we'll cover, not places yet, but please let people know not only that they're coming up, but that we really want people to attend. So we have 4 meeting objectives here. It is first to update you concerning our work. Second, to explain what we do. In other words, it's one thing to say we've reviewed something, we've approved it. It's not working without the microphone. Okay. Our second goal is to explain what we do. It's one thing to say we reviewed something, we've approved it, but what does that mean? And so we wanted to give you some insight tonight in how we go about that. And we're going to do that by looking at the thing we're most focused on in year 1, which is policies. Then we're going to also talk about how we do our work and the project management approach and how we are managing this project. An important part of this is engagement. We have 2 issues that we're going to want feedback from you on. One is the notion of a community partner to help us spread the word. And second is an idea that we put in our evaluation plan. It's the idea of forming a community liaison council. And we'll tell you more about that idea, but we want some feedback as we're trying to think through about whether that's something we should do, and if so, how we can make it work. And the most important part, of course, is understanding. We want to make sure you understand our work, but we want to make sure we understand your questions and concerns. And so we will have time for that at the end. Perhaps not as much time as people might like, but we'll do our best. And anything we don't get to tonight, you can ask us through our website, or as I said, we'll be hanging around afterwards. But we're also trying to balance our need to tell you a lot of things and the fact that it's the end of the day for everyone. Before we move forward with that, I did want to address 2 things preliminarily. We are very much aware of the events that have happened recently that are very much of concern to the community, concerns about us too. It would be nice if the slides could follow me rather than leading me. So if you could just go back, that would be very helpful. Thank you. We are very concerned about the incident that happened with Mr. Moteri. We are watching the the MPD's response to that. Obviously, we're not an investigative agency. We don't run the department, but our role is to review the systems that contribute to events like this, and we'll be doing that. We understand the city is going to have an external review, like all of you were waiting to hear more about that. And the second thing we have gotten lots of questions about is the prospects for a federal consent decree. Now, we don't have any role in that process, and our position has been that until there is one, we really have nothing to say about it. It wouldn't be appropriate for us to talk about it. And if people have questions and want to make comments, that's fine. I just want people to know right up front that we're aware of it. There may be little we can say about it here. But just as important, I don't want either of those things to detract from the importance of the work we have to do under this agreement. We have an agreement, and this agreement has the potential to make important changes to the way policing happens in Minneapolis. And it will take a lot of work and a lot of time, and we'll need your support and partnership in that. So what we're hoping to do mostly today is lay the foundation for you about the work we need to do and how we need to do it and how we'll work on this together. So I hope that's a good approach for all of you, but we will definitely take questions and receive feedback before we leave here this evening. Okay, now if we can go to the next slide. Now, we're going to take a few minutes. I talked about engagement. We need a QR code, please, Carolina. This is a thing called a Mentimeter. What you'll do if you have a phone, take a photo of the QR code. I'll step back on the mic, which I really hate to do. I don't like to be constrained. But there'll be a QR code. Take a picture, and it will call up a survey. And a couple of times tonight, we're going to ask you for some feedback through the Mentimeter. Now, of course, if you don't have your cell phone or don't trust the technology or the tech companies that are spying on your every move, you'll have other opportunities to give us feedback directly or through the website. But we will be able to display some of the answers. And so just to get your fingers warmed up and used to it, our first question is, what is the best hidden gem restaurant in Minneapolis? We all travel a lot. The hotels send us to the hotel spots. We want to know the places that you all think we should eat at that we might not otherwise find. Or we also are big music fans. So if you know a hidden music venue, a dive bar, or a corner bar that we wouldn't otherwise know, put it in the Mentimeter. All right? And then that'll tell us where we need to go. And you'll see as we get more, it moves around. And, I think sometimes we could do a vote, but this is just going to be a word cloud. So if you have a particular favorite restaurant, tell the person next to you to put that restaurant in, because then that will get bigger. So you get more publicity for your. So, but now I see people know how to use that, so we can go on to the work that matters.
Got it.
Huh?
I got the word cloud. We're good.
Yeah. You got the word cloud. Okay. We'll come back and display the word cloud later if anyone's interested. Microphone. Now, for those of you who are at our public meetings, you'll remember that one of the things we talked about doing was a community map. Because we wanted, so many groups in this city particularly are engaged in the mission of public safety and improved policing. We wanted to know who those were, and we wanted you all to know who each other is. And so what we've generated is a community map. Carolina, is this the slide or the live link?
Slide.
That's the slide.
Slide, she said.
Slide. Can we get the live link? We cannot get, all right. If you go to our website, this map is live on our website. What you see is the gray circles identify the organizations, and then there we show the connections between organizations. Tags describe the nature of that group's mission. For example, is it primarily police reform, or maybe it's mental health, but policing practices are an important part of that. And then instructions. Now the key is we have begun building this based on what we know. but we don't know all the organizations and we don't know all the things about those organizations. So what we'd like people to do, either tonight or through our website, if you are in an organization that has an interest or connection to policing or public safety, we'd like you to go in, fill out the questionnaire. The map is updated and it's always in real time, and it will continue to grow and evolve over the course of our work. And that's important because one day we will all be gone, but it is our hope that you all will have strengthened the connections between you so that you're in a better position to sustain the changes that we will be making together over the course of this agreement. Oh, sound good? All right, thank you. All right, a couple of things that we've done. I'm coming back. All right, so we have spent this first part of our work here largely getting to know this community and all of you all. We've also done an evaluation plan. I'm not going to talk much about the evaluation plan. I'll touch on it, but simply in the interest of time, I think we either have a handout or a summary that's on our website. You can read the plan. Happy to answer questions about it if people have them. But it's not my plan to spend a lot of time reviewing that because I think there's more interesting things we can do tonight. And so the first interesting thing we can do, we want to tell you about our efforts to get to know the community and our work with the various organizations so far. So I'm going to ask Arlinda Westbrook to do that. And Arlinda is one of our deputies, and she is our lead for community engagement.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very, very much for being here. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done and also kind of highlight a little bit of what type of welcome we've had here in Minneapolis. First, the settlement agreement calls for community engagement, and the main goal of it is designed to build a police department that meets the needs of the community. In order to achieve that, we need to hear from the people with lived experiences. One of the things, because of that we did early on, we had two particular groups while we were in the interview process that actually reached out to us and wanted immediately to meet with us, to start to introduce us to various communities here in Minneapolis. And they did that with each of the different groups that were interviewing. And so, Unity Community Mediation Team and also CUAPB, both were groups that reached out to us and met with us early on and did a tremendous amount of work with us even before we were contracted. We came down before we actually signed a contract and started to meet with communities. Unity Community Mediation Team brought us through many different sites throughout the city. We were in the rain, we were in the snow. It didn't matter what the weather was like. They walked us through each and every, from the indigenous community to our Somalian community. We went to every aspect, south, north. I didn't even realize there was an east and a west. And we have walked through each. And so what they have done, especially with bringing us to their different sites, they have a number of sites with different communities like organizations like the NAACP, Urban League. They have major sites where what they're doing in those sites is attempting to work through taking complaints. They took us to each of those sites to talk with them and to let us know some of the things they needed in order for these sites to potentially be compliant with the consent decree. So we organized for them to get with the Office of Police, OPCR, and make sure that there was some training done, and also make sure that we can build these sites up so that one of the things we found was a void in people being able to file complaints, because you have to make some type of appointment to get into City Hall. We know that's not really an open forum for complaints. So we're looking to see if possibly through some training and through some work that maybe some of these sites can be built out. So I'm just impressed with the amount of work that has already happened in Minneapolis even before we got here. With Communities United Against Police Brutality, they have helped with making recommendations on police policies. Some of our major policies on use of force, they have sat with red lines and given countless hours making recommendations to the city, making recommendations to ELEFA. That is such a key component of the engagement that the settlement agreement foresaw for the community, to make sure that there was some type of policy review of all the 4 major policies that we have to deal with. So again, I have to say the same thing again. So impressed with the amount of engagement. So I don't even want to pretend that we are in any way educating you. I've been educated on many aspects of what community engagement looks like and what this community has already done in order to already start this work. We're not doing anything but furthering, through some assistance, the work that's already been done. We also have a number of other, like Minneapolis for a Better Police Contract, have met with me countless times to make recommendations, to make sure that we understood what was coming with the contract with the police, and making sure that we had all of the resources and information that we needed to understand that. Again, I can't believe the amount of work that is happening in Minneapolis well before a settlement agreement, while the settlement agreement is going. And so the reason that David was even mentioning some of the things we talked about before, one of the things I wanted to do tonight is make sure that those communities and those organizations that I've mentioned are the ones that have reached out to us and have taken us through various organizations throughout this community. I know there are many impacted organizations and families that we have not met yet. And what we want tonight to be about is to make sure that we meet you tonight, that you let us know who you are, that you fill out the survey, that you make sure that there is a clear understanding. Some may not want to talk in a space like this. So make sure before you leave tonight, you pull us on the side. We have one of our attorneys here who is a pro bono attorney, and if you have to leave your name and information with him, please do so. If you raise your hand right here from Nelson Mullins, because we know that sometimes in this space, it's not a safe space for people to speak in. So we want to continue to expand and build out what that engagement will look like and what that engagement will be going forward. Again, we really want to make sure that through that application process, please everybody who's interested in maybe being a local liaison or a local partner, we know that we're going to need boots on the ground, because as I've even named some of the other organizations a few minutes ago, generally I'm getting a call as soon as something happens here in Minneapolis. And we are very much engaged and know what's happening as it happens. I want to make sure we always have that pipeline of connection to the community, and we have the ability to speak to and know exactly what's going on, that we know what's important to this community. The biggest thing we want to leave here with now in my comments is I want to make sure that we understand what you want to see in engagement. That's the reason we're asking you some questions. We did not want to take it upon ourselves to decide what engagement looks like for Minneapolis. I've gotten many different ideas of what engagement is. And what I want to do is make sure that we work together to decide what's going to be the best model for Minneapolis, and I think will be the best model for the country going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlinda. Is your laptop? The magic appearing laptop? So we're not going to make these changes without engaging all of the community, and a big component of that community is the police department. So we want to talk a little bit now about our work with the police department, and to do that I'm going to turn to Chief Harrison, co-lead evaluator, and more importantly, the chief who has brought New Orleans along the path to compliance in Baltimore, so he has a real perspective on this process from the inside, from the perspective of a chief. So I'd like him to share that with you.
Thank you, David, and good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. It's important that you're here. We appreciate it, especially at the end of the day. It says a lot that you're here. I've met many of you. I know many of you. For those who don't know me, my name is Michael Harrison. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. I spent my entire 28-year career there as a police officer, becoming the chief in 2014, and was the chief of police until 2019, where I then was recruited to go to Baltimore, Maryland, where I spent the next 4.5 years as the police commissioner there. Both of those departments are under federal consent decrees. Let me just share this with you. In 2012, the Department of Justice called the New Orleans Police Department the most troubled department in America. And then in 2017, the Department of Justice called Baltimore the most dysfunctional and broken department in America. So I guess you say, well, what's wrong with me? That I've been to both of them. Well, I call it the honor and the responsibility of having to lead those departments through those federally mandated reforms. And today, while both are still in those decrees, New Orleans about to exit, neither are perfect, but both of those departments are model agencies and have had significant culture change. They have become what we aim to help Minneapolis become, which is a self-assessing, self-correcting police department. I, too, have met and built promising relationships with many community members, many of you in this room, and organizations from across this city. Because of the uniqueness of my experience, I've spent, especially having led 2 departments in federally mandated consent decrees, I've spent a significant amount of time meeting the members of this police department. I have attended most, if not all, of the roll calls. I've heard from the deputy chiefs, the assistant chiefs, the command staff, inspectors, commanders. I didn't just meet with them to introduce myself and explain my work, our work, but to help them understand and accept the reforms that are happening within their department. I've explained to the members of the department, to some very intensely, how their authority to enforce the law has not changed because the Constitution has not changed. However, I continue to work to clarify the goal of the reforms is to bring the department in line with national best practices, which promote public safety and building trust that was never built and repairing trust that was once broken. I spend a lot of time listening to the members talk about what's important to them and how it affects them. They tell me how they now view this community. And they tell me now how they believe this community views them. They are all concerned about how the elected officials view them. I also meet with Chief O'Hara regularly, in person, virtually, and by phone, not just to bring the concerns of the members to him, which I do, but to offer myself as a resource to the chief. I share my experiences as a chief, as he is now a transformational leader who has to shift culture by making extremely tough and sometimes very unpopular decisions about personnel matters, operational functions, management functions that rattle the status quo to be different, policy and training decisions that make members have to unlearn previous bad practices and then reteach and relearn the new constitutional best way, which is hard, because change is hard. But this constitutional best practice way is not new. It's just new to them. As with all chiefs, Chief O'Hara is and should always make decisions that are in favor of the organization and in favor of the community alike. Never make decisions in favor of individual members. I also spend a lot of time with my team and this team balancing the role of monitoring and the department in reporting to the community with the understanding of the police department's willingness and its capacity, or the lack thereof, to make the reforms that meet deadlines. Much of our role is to help the chief and the department correct their unwillingness and overcome any capacity deficiencies. In addition to co-leading the team with David, I'm here to remind the city, this police department, and this community that reform and transformation are possible while providing public safety at the same time. It can be done because it has been done. We are a team built of both monitors and managers that have made it happen in 2 other cities, and we look forward to watching it happen here. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And let me just say, through all these meetings, we have not really found any resistance to this process in the department or in the city. everyone knows that change is needed here, and everybody wants to see change happen. People have their own perspectives on it, and it affects each person in different ways, but we are not seeing opposition. I will be candid and say we are seeing a lot of distrust. People believe they are individually committed to the change, but are deeply skeptical whether others are. But we are gratified that we've been able to step into that, and everyone has really worked with us. And our goal here is, by achieving the requirements of the agreement, we're going to build a floor, a foundation for all the other important work that you all will go on to do. We recognize our work fits in with other important public safety initiatives that are also going on in the city, and we know that there will be others beyond what we can do. But our goal is to make a strong foundation that supports those other efforts. We'll come back to, as I said briefly, to the evaluation plan, but I do want to talk a little bit, how do we do this? And the short answer is, same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. We have an agreement. It has, I can't now remember how many, 400 paragraphs, roughly, more than 400 paragraphs, of very specific things the department has to do. And so what it really is, it's a big checklist of things they have to do. Some are harder, some are easier. And so our approach, this is really a project management challenge. And so we bring a project management approach to the work. Let me illustrate how we do that. Working with the department, we have developed an elaborate, it's a smart sheet. It is an elaborate project management tool. And we have, to the best of our ability, broken down each of the steps to achieve compliance with each paragraph of the agreement. We've identified the people who are responsible for those paragraphs. We have identified deadlines and timelines for each step in the process. Now you're going to have to listen, because I got to look at the screen, so I'll talk a little bit louder, but we just have a snippet here from the actual spreadsheet. And so you'll see here, it looks like we have on the far end the policy requirement, the initiative, the action item. This is the thing that has to be done. It's a little bit of a descriptive note about what it is. Then we see time to completion, what the original start date was, the original due date, anticipated date, revised due date, completed date, et cetera, owners, and it scrolls ahead. The spreadsheet, if we laid the whole thing out, it would stretch from that wall to this wall. But the way we use it is, first of all, we generate reports. Each week, we pick sections of this and say, where are we? And we have meetings weekly with the implementation unit, and we go through them. Where are we on this? Are we on track with this task? Are we off track? Is it at risk? Does it need attention? Each of those are codes in there, and we use it to manage the process. In fact, this morning and tomorrow, we spent today, all day today and all day tomorrow, spent meeting with them saying, where are we in this process? Are we slipping? Do we make sure that everybody who knows they have a responsibility here knows what it is, knows what is expected of them, and importantly, tells us if they need something? Because, and maybe the chief can talk about this, we'll have a chance a little later in question and answer. Police departments are paramilitary organizations. Stuff rolls down to you and you're told to do it. And the culture is you don't really push it back up. You don't complain, you just suck it up and get it done. But as the chief was saying, we are asking people to do things they've never been trained to do, they haven't done before, and they need help. So we have to build a culture that says, I need help to do this. I either need someone else to help me because I can't write all these policies in this time, or I need someone to help me understand how to do this, or I need someone to tell my supervisor to stop telling me, you don't have time to do that, come over here and do this. Our role is to help them identify and overcome obstacles to getting this work done. We say that we're the evaluator or consent decree monitor. The truth is our real job is to be a coach, to help this department achieve the goals that it agreed to, bringing our expertise in law enforcement and quite frankly, in consent decree management. So we have weekly meetings with the department, we have weekly meetings with the parties, we have lots and lots of meetings to get all of these pieces moving along. Overall, it's still early. We're generally on track, but it's early. Now, a version of this spreadsheet soon will be posted on our website so that all of you can see where things are. But we probably won't do that until we get some evaluations, because the truth is everything, almost everything you would say not assessed. But as we sort of have real progress that we can then report, we'll start posting that and we'll start updating it so all of you can follow along with what we're doing. So the goal is to be as transparent on this process as possible. And quite frankly, all of you play an important role in holding everyone accountable to the commitments that have been made. And we have our responsibilities. So, you know, sometimes the department says, you owe us, and we're like, okay, we got you. So it holds everybody accountable, and you all collectively will hold all of us accountable. All right, so that's the process piece of it. But now we just want to give you a sense of how we do what we do. What does it mean? As I said earlier, well, we review and approve, but how do we do that? So the thing we're focused on now is policies. And what we hope to do in each of these meetings, we'll pick one area and sort of do a sort of similar explanation of our approach to the work. But what we'd like to do tonight is I'm going to invite Lisa Fink to come up. Lisa is our policy lead, and she's going to talk to you for a few minutes about how she does what she does.
And if I don't put you all to sleep, you'll be able to hear the rest of the presentation. My name is Lisa Fink. I am very pleased to be able to talk to you all about the process of reviewing policy, which is not as exciting as it sounds. I have had the privilege of working on living, breathing, and writing police policy since the earliest days of the Baltimore Police Department federal consent decree, which started in 2017. I was hired by the department to write compliant policies with their federal decree. At the time, Baltimore's consent decree was the most extensive consent decree that the DOJ had entered into, and so it was and continues to be a significant endeavor. In that work, not only is a huge portion of writing policies, researching and writing policies, but given the massive machine of the DOJ consent decree, I also had the opportunity to sit at the table with our monitoring team and Department of Justice attorneys to really hash out, negotiate, and collaborate on explicit language that ended up in Baltimore's policies. And it really gave me an insight in a very keen way of a lot of the positions, policy language and practices that the DOJ was advocating for, not only in Baltimore, but kind of generally speaking in their police reform work. Since moving on from that full-time position at Baltimore, I've been able to have the privilege of using this experience and knowledge in other work as well. I served for nearly 4 years on the Cleveland consent decree monitoring team. I've had the opportunity to work with a small group of experts on the Puerto Rico Police Bureau settlement agreement with DOJ, and I also help a small university write police policy as well. Slide. Thank you. So some important grounding to just talk about first. When it comes to the negotiated language that ends up in a Department of Justice consent decree and or a state or DOJ settlement agreement, oftentimes really that language reflects what is a higher standard of policing. It reflects not only best practices, but also where policing is headed as a profession. And MPD's settlement agreement with MDHR is no different. Of course, you know, the US DOJ settlement agreements kind of rely on this, on the Constitution as their basis, and in Minnesota's case, not only do we have the Constitution to rely on, but also the higher standard that is representative in Minnesota law with the Human Rights Act and the Minnesota State Constitution. Thank you. So we do have, I want to talk a little bit about our team because, you know, I've written police policy basically every day since 2017, but we represent an extensive and diverse body of knowledge and experience on this stage. You know, we have had direct experience as a team with implementing police policy, managing police conduct through policy and supervision, and assessing the effectiveness of policy through evaluating police practices. And so all of that experience through many of us through having worked with police departments, and also many of us having served on either as subject matter experts and or on monitoring teams. We bring all of that experience when we do our review of policies. We like to stay up to speed on what's going on in terms of national best practices. There's lots of information out there and available. We refer to model policies, particularly policies at police departments that have been that are under federal consent decrees are often good places to look. We look at national guidance from government entities, academic institutions, police research organizations, advocacy groups. There's a lot of people doing good research and writing really informed papers on what's on police practices and policy. And then, of course, the professional experience that I just spoke about really helps us kind of take all this body of knowledge and experience as we review policy. So what I wanted to briefly speak about is just what the process of police policy review looks like for the 4 core policy areas under this settlement agreement. MPD on their website has identified nearly 80 policies that fit under this umbrella of these 4 core topic areas in the settlement agreement. And so the quickest way I can describe it is MPD does a heck of a ton of work before we even see anything, doing a whole bunch of research, talking to internal stakeholders, and putting together a really solid draft of a policy. And then at this juncture, what they're doing is they're posting them on the website for public comment for 45 days. I'm assuming some of you all had the opportunity back in 2023 when they did this massive rollout of these public sessions on the 4 core policy areas to participate in those. So all of that feedback that had been received in 2023 was also part of the information that MPD was using in order to draft these versions of the policies that now they are in the process of posting online for 45 days. So, for example, they had use of force policies posted for 45 days. I believe it was back in July, somewhere around there this summer, which had incorporated feedback received from the community from the previous year. They currently have the non-discriminatory police draft policy posted for public comment and are accepting public feedback, I believe, until mid-December. And they are soon to post the stop, searches, citations, and arrest tranche of policies for the public to provide feedback on. And that's available for anybody, community groups, CCPO, any individuals who are interested in looking at the proposed policies, digging in, and providing feedback. That is the whole purpose of that process. So after the 45 days, MPD takes all the feedback that they've received, they consider that feedback and apply much of it to the drafts, and then they submit the drafts to both MDHR and our team, ELEFA, for a formal review. The settlement agreement allows 14 days to MDHR for them to review. The policy gives us 30 days to either approve or provide comment. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what our review looks like. Again, we have 30 days to review. I personally like to review the section of the settlement agreement that the policy is written to, just to refresh my memory of the requirements. And then we start our review through various lenses. We're looking at it to ensure that every single requirement in the settlement agreement is integrated into the policy. And we flag if there's places that we either think that an agreement requirement is missed, or we don't necessarily think it was properly integrated. We're also looking to make sure that the policy is clear and concise. It has to be understandable by officers. They are going to be the ones expected to implement it, and we want consistent implementation. And also, if the policy is clear, then you can clearly hold someone accountable to it. So that feels like a very important lens through which we review policy. Also, when we talk about it being concise and clear, you want to make sure that the steps are logical and that the important stuff is up front so that an officer can't miss it on page 20, right? The policy needs to be executable. And then we also look at the policy and compare it to and ensure that it aligns with the guiding principles. The settlement agreement has both overarching guiding principles that kind of speak to the whole agreement, non-discriminatory policing, treating individuals with humanity and dignity, procedural justice, de-escalation, and then individual sections have their own guiding principles. So what is reflected on the paper in terms of actual procedure and process need to be able to align with the vision of the guiding principles. We also review the public comment that was received to understand how MPD considered and incorporated it, because that is part of their requirements under the agreement. And then the general best practices, based on, again, all of the experience that our team has, we review and look for where there are opportunities to integrate best practices. And if we see something that's an opportunity, even if it isn't necessarily a settlement agreement requirement, we do flag it for MPD and we encourage them to consider if it's something that they feel that they could potentially implement here, based on the experience that we have and what we've seen work in other places. And then, just so that you're aware, I'm not the only member of our team reviewing policy. For every policy, we have multiple members of the team reviewing it, kind of bringing our experience and skills to that. Once we have commented on the policies, we meet together, make sure that we're on the same page, then we send our feedback back to MPD within our 30-day deadline. After MPD receives our feedback, MDHR's feedback, they apply the feedback, and then we'll get to the process of finalizing the policy, which, depending on how much there is to say, might be some in-person lively meetings or a few more back and forths before we get to in-person meetings. But that's really the goal, is that we come to a place where these policies not only incorporate all those settlement agreement requirements, but really are the best way to convey requirements to officers and ensure that there is consistent understanding across the board. And then, of course, setting up the department for the ability to train officers on those requirements in the policy. Lastly, I just wanted to mention the settlement agreement does have an annual policy review requirement. So what that means is, on an annual basis, after these have gone through their initial approval, the MPD will need to revisit the policies, ensure that either they feel solid about them or see if there's any edits they need to make based on what they've seen working and not in the field. And then they are required to both conduct additional public feedback sessions as well as post policies for an additional 45 days prior to making any policy updates on the future iterations. So that, in a nutshell, is, I forgot to talk about this. This is simply to show you, example of what our review might entail. This is part of the guiding principles policy from use of force. We got it clean from MPD, and we send it with a whole bunch of comments. That's not necessarily only my comments. I'm usually just the person typing at the keyboard, but those are kind of our team's collective comments. So that's kind of how we do. We really work through it and try to flag places where we see opportunities or we want to make sure that they're fully addressing the requirement. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
So I think it was either Mark Twain or Winston Churchill who once wrote, "I apologize for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." That's really true for the policy. Like, writing policies that accurately reflect the law, are reasonably concise, understandable, is a very labor-intensive process. And that's what it takes a lot of input from a lot of people, and we have a lot of people working very hard at it. None more so than Lisa. All right. So I said I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on the evaluation plan, and I'm not. The evaluation, because I haven't, now that I'm quoting famous people, I think it was Dwight D. Eisenhower said, before the battle, plans are everything, but after the battle commences, plans are nothing. So in that spirit, the parties had an agreement, but I think one of the smart things they did was recognize when we get started, things may change and may look different. And that was particularly true here because they had an agreement, I think it was in July, but we didn't get started till March, nearly a year later, and they had done things. So the agreement said, okay, after 90 days of the appointment of the evaluator, they will put out their evaluation plan. And it has a lot of technical requirements. And as I said, there's a summary on our website, but how we're going to review data and what measures we're going to use and things like that I don't know are candidly worth anybody's time to discuss tonight. As I said, happy to answer questions. But important parts is what we put about how we were going to approach this task and break it down. And so this slide just shows what we have prioritized for year one and for year two. Makes a lot of sense. The first thing we had to do is get the right policies in place. And then once you have the right policy, and we're projecting that, we're hoping that that can be done by the end of the first year. And once you get the right policies in place, then you train on them. So you see the emphasis in year one are the policies we've listed, but then we'll begin training on those policies as they come online. And in year two, we'll continue with policies and shift more to training. And as we get the training done and officers know what's expected of them and they have a chance to practice, that's when we will start really kind of auditing. Because it just doesn't make sense to begin auditing practices that have already been found to be deficient. It's just not an efficient use of, frankly, taxpayer money or anyone's time. But as we get these policies in place, as we get some of the data systems online, then we can start to measure and look at compliance, and then we'll look at compliance levels and start to move the department toward where it needs to be in terms of translating the requirements of the agreement into practices on the street. So that's essentially our approach on that. So we have a lightning round. The team meets regularly, and we report out on the big developments, just as we've done here, evaluation plan, we've talked about policies, but then we wrap up each of our meetings with a lightning round. Okay, everybody, where are you on your things? You have 2 minutes to do it, so we're going to we have much more than we can really cover, and people can ask more questions in the question and answer period or catch us afterwards. So we fight over the last cookies, but I'm going to just do a lightning round for those to ask me, just give a quick 2-minute sketch of where we are in your areas. And since Mary Ann, you were on the end, I'm going to start with you. Mary Ann is also one of our deputies, and she's been working on accountability and stop, search, and arrest.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Ann Viverette, as David said, and I'm a retired police chief from Maryland. I spent 21 years as a chief, and I'm working on accountability and oversight with Arlinda, who had 12 years as a civilian director in New Orleans over their internal affairs. So the two of us were very anxious to come in and just have a fresh look at some of the problems that IA and the Office of Police Conduct Review, also known as OPCR, were having. And our primary focus the last 6 months has been the investigation backlogs. I'm going to talk about that for a few minutes. Helping with revising policies and standard operating procedures, which I'll talk about. And then we wanted to conduct an in-depth evaluation of the complaint intake processes. So the backlogs are a problem for both the community and also for the officers. In some cases, there were 300 backlog cases where there were at times years where a complainant didn't hear what the result was, or the officer wasn't disciplined for what they did. And that is a problem for everyone. If someone violates a policy and they can continue to violate it if they're not disciplined for several years. So that's been a huge part of the last 6 months that we've been working on, and we have weekly calls about it, and we've, I think, made some suggestions that they're working through that are going to make progress. There are several reasons for the backlog. One of them is obviously when something happens in the community, there can be a big influx of cases, and oftentimes there aren't enough personnel to assign those cases to. So that causes some of the backlog. OPCR also had considerable turnover. So when you're training new people to do investigations, that takes time. And cases sometimes are left when somebody leaves the agency. They have to be reassigned to someone who already has enough of a caseload already. So that's a problem. They've also had some problems with software. There's some redundancy where things have to be replicated, or there's change in software packages where the employees have to learn the new process. So all of those are factors that contribute toward it, but it's on our radar, and we're working on it with them. OPCR hired a external investigator to assist with the backlog, and we think that's going to infuse new investigators and help with it as well. And we've received plans that we anticipate the backlog to be eliminated in both units by March of 2025, which is good news. All the employees are trained on the current policies, but as we develop new policies, everyone will be required to learn the new policies and be trained on those as well. And of course, training takes them away from the time that they have to investigate cases. The city has recruited and hired a permanent civil rights director, Michelle Phillips. We're excited about her being on board. She has extensive experience with investigation backlogs and has worked on other consent decrees. Ms. Phillips recently named a permanent director of OPCR, Russell, and he's here tonight with us. Not with us, but in the room. And we've been discussing specific work on the standard operating procedures. That's really important because when you write a SOP, you want anyone who comes in from the outside to be able to look at that standard operating procedure, and if they leave the following week, someone new should be able to know exactly how to go through the process from A to Z. So that's been a big part of our weekly meetings. Policy revisions, just like I said, you have to do policy, then you have to do training, and then we start doing auditing. And lastly, we think it's important to mention coaching. That's been a concern, sometimes articles in the media about officers that are coached when they should have been disciplined. So they're working on some new policies and procedures that Arlinda's been very active with, and we anticipate those new policies will be closely in alignment with the settlement agreement. And lastly, our next steps will be to get into the case files next year, look at the quality and thoroughness of investigations. And by the end of next year, we'll be looking at audits of body-worn camera and in-car cameras to look at their usage and to monitor police conduct. So that's accountability and oversight.
All right. Julie Solomon is responsible for officer wellness and crisis intervention. Julie, your bio's on the screen, so you can get right to the report.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again. Just echoing everybody else's just sentiment of thank you for taking the time to come out tonight and to hear and to listen, for us to listen. And I look forward, all of us look forward to hearing your feedback and your comments and questions. I was laughing a minute ago because 3 of us got in last night and went out to eat. And we all need reading glasses. And John was the only one to bring his, and I also need distance. And so I am going to take off rather than put both of them on. I'm just going to take them off and do my best. As David said, I'm overseeing the Section 8 and 9 of the settlement agreement, so that's officer wellness and support and mental and behavioral health crisis response. My background is in behavioral health at the intersection of criminal justice, and I work with police departments around the country in that space. Just very briefly on the officer wellness section, the department and the city have a lot to do in that space. All of us know that there's been a lot of trauma in this community to communities, to the police department, and it's going to take time and priority to sort of develop a culture within the department that shows the prioritization of wellness. And, we have spent quite a bit of time this year really sort of putting some intentional pressure on making sure that officers are feeling a change in the way in which they are supported. The staffing of the wellness unit, I've had the privilege of really getting to know. We meet biweekly, and while it's a very small unit, it's a very dedicated unit that brings their heart, their soul, their mind to the work. Was one of the areas that we anticipate and expect to grow over the period of this settlement agreement, and expect that that's going to happen sooner than later. Right now, there is just 2 dedicated personnel there. One was just hired as a manager. That's a civilian role with a background. She's a psychologist. And there is a lieutenant that is retiring and a sergeant, a sworn position that's on the department. So there's a commander that oversees but has, I think, 13 other duties as well. So he's navigating a lot. So that the staffing issue is something that we're going to be looking for. Expanding the clinical services. The department, the wellness unit, has done a really nice job of assessing the current clinical services that are available to the department, and looking at opportunities to expand those services, and so that is coming soon. The department and the city have done a nice job with 2 of the requirements under the settlement agreement, with producing an employee support plan and also a facilities non-database and equipment plan. So those were both requirements. There were formal external vendors that completed those a year ago, and the city has been working on developing a pretty robust plan on both of those. The facilities plan has a lot of component parts to officer wellness and support, among other things like HVAC systems and roofs and those sorts of things. But de-escalation rooms, mothers' rooms, break rooms, those sorts of things that matter on an everyday basis are a part of that facility plan, and that we're spending a lot of time having prioritization of those things to be completed earlier than later. The employee wellness plan does a really nice job of outlining the things that we're talking about up here: policies, training, the clinical service provisions, crisis intervention responses, family support, peer support programs, et cetera. So there'll be a lot to come as that continues to roll out. And then the primary needs as it relates to officer wellness and support are around staffing, policy development, training. There's insufficient training as it relates to wellness and support that needs to change. And data infrastructure to capture a lot of the data that is required under settlement agreement and that's needed for operationalizing best practices. Switching over to, this one's going to be short because there's really not a lot.
I'm about to start tapping my foot,
I'm
Julie.
sorry, okay. The mental and behavioral health crisis response. There's really only 2 paragraphs in the settlement agreement that are related to this, and frankly, that's problematic. There are a lot of services that are missing in this space. There are a couple of things under the training section of the settlement agreement related to crisis intervention training. So right now, there's a mandatory model. All recruits receive 40 hours of CIT training, crisis intervention team training, that is about responding to people in mental health crisis. And then there's an 8-hour required training for an annual in-service for all officers. Under settlement agreement, there will also be a new training for the MECC, the 911 call center. That's desperately needed. I think the 911 call center gets overlooked a lot in this space. and I could talk for 20 more minutes on that, but I won't.
No, you couldn't.
So, so I think, that's it. There is no specialized response really within the department. There is no CIT coordinator. There's no sort of elevated specialized response as it relates to those calls for service that do require some level of police response. So that's it. Thank you.
That's it for now, but
I know, for now.
we'll have other meetings, and you'll spend more time. John Solomon is our project management manager. I think I stole his thunder by talking about project management, but John, 1 minute of updates?
I don't need a minute.
Okay.
Right. I'm John Solomon. I'm the project manager for the team. I'm not a subject matter expert, at least in the things that are covered in this settlement agreement, but I do have experience from New Orleans. I worked for the city of New Orleans.
No bio. No
Pardon?
bios. Bios are on the screen.
Got it.
Get to the report.
So I wrangle these cats on the stage. That's what I do.
There we go.
There we go.
Good evening. I'm Eric Malawson. I'm the former Deputy Commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department's Compliance Bureau. I also was the Chief of Staff there for 3 years. My biggest background on this is data systems, technology systems. My updates are about body-worn cameras, the early intervention system, which is a key tool for understanding officer conduct and potential misconduct that can be prevented, and data systems generally. What we find is that you can't monitor what you can't measure. And you need data systems and systems of record to be able to measure things. And so the city has undertaken a massive assessment of all of its landscape when it comes to technology. That's been done. We've looked at that. It's been more than sufficient to the task. They're now in the process of planning around that assessment. They found deficiencies about what systems can and cannot do, whether or not they meet the settlement agreement, whether or not they need to be updated or completely replaced. One of the things that was mentioned earlier was misconduct. That's one of the systems that's being completely thrown out and started from scratch. The early intervention system is something that's brand new. It's going to interconnect with the use of force reporting modules, stops, searches, arrests. It's going to understand more about officer behavior when it comes to sick leave or overtime usage. It's designed to get a wide-angle lens and a specific view of how officer conduct could potentially lead to acts of misconduct and to try to get in front of it before the bad act happens. So they're already underway. They've selected a vendor for that. The implementation for that should be in the next 12 months or so for a phase 1 deployment, and then within the next year after that, phase 2 deployment. I've been very impressed by the level of energy and effort around that effort. The city IT is taking a big lead in that, but the team from MPD here is in the back. Nick, why don't you wave really quick? Nick can answer any questions about early intervention. They've been very instrumental in pushing that ball forward. That's going to be a critical tool. And then finally, body-worn cameras. They're working on a policy now that, again, largely already reflected a lot of what the settlement agreement required of them. It's just making sure they've got all the I's dotted and T's crossed. They should have that policy done up and sent out to officers for training by March. And so that's a key factor. That's one of the one-year goals that you saw up on the screen earlier. Body-worn camera activation is critical. We got to make certain that folks are turning these cameras on in every instance for which it's applicable, because when we come back and do our audits, the body-worn camera footage is the foundation for us to understand whether or not folks are doing what they're supposed to under the policies and training they've received. So that's the efforts we're undertaking. We're going to continue to meet monthly with them on the data plan. The early intervention system has its own monthly meetings. I've been encouraged by that level of effort, but I'm also mindful that coordination is only it's only as good as the cooperation between entities. City IT is different from the police department, right? And they're responsible for a lot of things, and they're doing good work, but the police department has to be leading on the requirements, what's necessary, and to ensure that the public is receiving the benefit of this new way of doing things, because the data systems will also lead to transparency. And that's a key factor in our goal, is to ensure that the data is out there, that it's readily known in public dashboards. And so that's a key factor that we're also making sure is part of the foundation for how we see this going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. And one person on our team who is not with us tonight, Bill Murphy, broke his foot. He's responsible for training and use of force, but we'll be talking more about training in our next meeting and use of force, so we'll more on that to follow. Carolina, I want to do the next slides in a different order. I want to go back to the Mentimeter. I want to see what people said about restaurants, but then I want to go to the Community Liaison Council idea. So can we first see what people say about restaurants? All right, is that a good list? Is that good? We like that? All right. All right, let's go. I want to now talk about the idea of a community liaison council. This is something we put in our evaluation plan. We're still, frankly, thinking about how it might work, and so we want to chat with you about that and get some feedback. So the notion of this community liaison council is to sort of have three roles. It is to represent the community broadly, to represent a cross-section of the Minneapolis community, to help the community, inform the community about the work that is being done, and to give us feedback about community questions and concerns, and then to develop the connection skills and understanding required to sustain these changes. This is about building systems. The community map is part of that, and the idea of the Community Liaison Council is part of that. And our thinking about that is this. It's great to have you all here at this meeting. And we would hope you would all come back to the next meeting, because we're hoping that we're building on a journey. This is like a course in police reform. And so you start with policies and training. But we also recognize the reality that not everybody will come. And so what happens, particularly after this is less exciting and it's just like, oh, they're still at it, is that the same people won't come. And then we lose continuity. So what we're thinking about is can we put together a group of people who will commit to engaging in this from start to finish to achieve these purposes? So the notion is the liaison council would be different from these meetings in that it would have both continuity and structure. Now, how we do that, who are the members, how frequently we meet, that we've gotten lots of input on, so we want to ask you all. So we want to go now to the Mentimeter. If you go back, scan the QR code. We have some questions for you to fill out. And while you're doing that, so I'll give you a few minutes to take that QR code. I think it's the same site, Carolina, right? Once they have it on the phone, the question now just comes up for you to answer. And there's just a few quick questions for you to answer about whether you think it's can we go back? People still need the QR code. So I think our questions are, do you think this is a good idea? Now, it's easy to say yes, but not do it. So the next question is, well, would you consider doing it? We're not saying it would be everybody, but we want to know if you're just thinking it's a good idea for other people to do. We want to know, I think maybe the question is, what is the size of the council? How often should it meet? A couple of things like that. There may be an open-ended question at the end, but this just allows us to get a quick snapshot to gauge reaction to the concept. All right. So while you're doing that, I want to now talk about you should all have it. You can fill it out even though it's not going to be on the screen. I want to talk about the community partner role. So we're here a lot. We meet with lots of you, lots of groups, as much as we can. And in a virtual world, we can have virtual meetings and we can talk by phone. But we would like to have someone here who is on the ground to help us, someone or some organization. It's not going to be the face of our group. We own our engagement with you. But it is helpful to have someone on the ground to help us spread the word, to give us feedback for when we're not here or when things arise. So simply put, we've got an application. If you or your organization is interested, we'd ask you to apply. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your interests, your connections, because we're looking for individuals or an organization that has broad connections through the city to help us communicate out and to get feedback. So in a nutshell, that's what we're looking for, if that's something anyone or any organization is interested in doing. And I don't know, it'll be just one. We're going to just evaluate what we get as a short questionnaire, and we'll probably follow up with questions for those who are interested. But that's something we'd like to do and make sure it has the broad support throughout the Minneapolis community. All right. Now, your turn. So we're happy to take your questions. I think we have a final slide that just has quick information, and I think it might be on a handout out there, but you can always contact us through our website. Tentatively, our next meeting will be March 13th and 14th. We have to confirm that and coordinate that with different groups. We try not to, it's never possible to have a meeting when there's no other meetings in a city this size, but if there's other big events, we try not to counter-program, as they say. So there may be some adjustment, but look at our website when the date, if the date changes, we'll let you know, and certainly we'll let you know the location. Can't read the future dates. Oh, and a recording of this meeting will be available for those who weren't able to attend on our website. All right, and we have the community organization map questionnaire, and I think we also have a Mentimeter question for feedback on this meeting that we don't need to apply. Do we have that? So if you go back to the Mentimeter and the next question in the survey, we'll ask you about how you felt about this meeting. But just in case you all hated it, we're not going to display the answers till we've gone and been able to go back and look. So now we want to open it up for questions and discussions. We don't have a system like the city does where you fill out a card. We have a manageable group, so we're just going to ask everybody to raise their hand, and we're going to do our best to go in order. We'll ask everybody, if you have more than one question, that's great, but we'll ask you to hold your second question until everybody's got a first question. But I think we have a manageable group and plenty of time, so I think we'll get to everybody. And I think, oh, and we have a microphone down here. Can we? I was just, they might be easier if we just hand it to folks.
Test.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being on the panel, taking time with us. My question is about the representative body. It seems as though there's an operating representative body that deals with a lot of the issues of policing and public safety in the city. And it's called the Community Commission on Police Oversight.
Can you speak up?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the middle.
Thank you. I was going to say, it seems that we have a body that's elected by people across the city and wards. By the way, I'm from Ward 11. And that ward representation means that people's voices, whether they're homeowners or renters, get to have a say in the policy reviews and considerations of the group. And the group is the Community Commission on Police Oversight. They represent my interests and the people I know around me better than the mayor does. So my question is, have you made some space for the CCPO in this process? And if so, what does that space look like?
I'll answer first and I'll let Arlinda answer it, but to just frame, so our role is clearly defined. It is about this agreement. Just, I would say our role is clearly defined by the agreement. We work in concert and in recognition of the other groups. But our role is defined just about enforcing the agreement. But I'll let Arlinda talk. I mean, we're definitely aware of the CCPO and work with it.
Yeah, one of the, is this on? Yeah, one of the things we've been talking about and working with the city is making sure there's more meaningful input from the CCPO in the policy process. We know that, and I think there's some that have been wanting to speak with us about how to expand it. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the agreement only really talked about the formation of it, and that was really it. So now what we're trying to do is build out and make sure that it has a more meaningful process of engagement for the public. And so we've been kind of starting that work with the city because we don't really have the ability to demand it. So we're trying to work in collaboration with how best. We have our president here now, lead of CCPO. I'm sorry, Commissioner. I'm sorry. Chair, I'm sorry. Our chair here tonight, and we have Ms. Stacy Sherman that's a part of it. And so we've been, Mary Ann and I, from day one, have been attending some of the meetings and been very interested because for us, because they have a component of the misconduct and they handle the disciplinary panels, that's another space that is very, very important to me, that that space is working efficiently and that the discipline is done efficiently. And so we're working now through some revisions of that I work very closely with Michelle Phillips, and that's one of the areas where they're trying to address, because of course that's one of the major pieces. There's policy input, and there is a major piece in reference to issuing of discipline. Those are two major pieces that the CCPO plays in this settlement agreement process right now.
Thank you. Yep, I'm Al Flowers. One quick one, just ELEFA, to make sure these surveys, a breakdown of these surveys between race. What did that mean when the people putting the surveys in? So I want to make sure that my community is putting in on them surveys. That's number one. And I'm just going to do two things. I'm not going to take the time. But I'm going to say to Minneapolis residents what the Unity Community Mediation Team been working on for the last 4 years. The reason the settlement agreement came is because of the treatment, the racism going against African Americans and Native. That's why I was here, not really, George Floyd got it cranked up, but the racism going against our community for many years is one reason we continue to work even while they were getting put in place. And so we left it out on the table outside. There's sites that we got all over the city of Minneapolis that people can go file complaints at. In north, south, all over Minneapolis, in each community, in the East African community, Latino, Native American, African American, European. We got sites over here, over south, one at Voice of East African, I see Farhia back there, and one at New Beginning Church on 43rd and First. So I just want people to know the work that we have been doing. ELEFA's, got nothing to complain about ELEFA. We've been having conversation with ELEFA before they even got the job. So we continue to work with them. They going in a path. So I just want the citizens of Minneapolis to know we got a website, Unity Community Mediation Team.us. That we trying to keep up with the information. Right now it's volunteer. We're trying to make it not be volunteer and get some help to those sites, what I'm talking about on here, 9 sites. That's what we've been doing. We've been working on it. They've been working on it. We got to bring everybody together. But I would speak, the NAACP just did a press conference yesterday seeing how we can work together as neighbors. So I've been here over 35 years. So I want us to work together. You'll see in this room, you won't see the diversity that you might see over north, but we got to come together. We can't move it unless we move it together, and that's what I would say. That's why I'm here tonight, to just ask y'all to look at what we're doing and support the process of what we've been doing with diverse communities. I just said it, and look at us and see what we're doing. And we have been working with them, and they have been doing a great job, so I ain't got nothing to say about them right now. Thank you.
Next. Wow, okay. Oh, here we go, all right, here we go. Oh.
Thank you. No. Is it working? Oh,
Yep.
It is. Hi, thank you. My name is Eileen Johnson, and you'll see some of us in our orange T-shirts here tonight. We represent 17 neighborhood safety walking groups, so safety walking clubs. We're neighbors, business, Minneapolis Police Department, and Park Police. We're all moving forward together in a spirit of friendship. And I just wanted to say that part of what we do is, in addition to helping in our neighborhoods, we also do educate ourselves we try to improve our municipal and civic acumen. So for us tonight, this opportunity is very important. We're very glad to walk away smarter than when we came. And the only thing that we can offer you, because we're all volunteers, we're not funded by anything, the only thing that we could offer you is at meetings, if you need people to pass out things and do microphones, we're happy to offer that service to you.
We appreciate that because getting the word out is just really hard. We put out press releases, it's made as public service announcements, but just letting people know, the best way is word of mouth to neighbors, to organizations, so.
Yeah, we do that all the time with municipal messages, MPD messages, park police, whatnot, park board messages. We just get out, we talk to people. We say, hey, do you know that there's this meeting coming up? We may have a small flyer, and we're happy to do that.
Thank you so much. We can take more questions. We can eat cookies. Oh, okay. Just me. I'm focused on the cookies, but that's okay.
I just have a question. Has the removal of qualified immunity ever been a policy that's adopted in any of these cities where the DOJ has become involved?
No, ma'am.
Okay. That would be a good thing to consider.
As you can imagine, that would be quite a battle to fight, but you're right. Yes?
Hi, Catherine Shreves with the League of Women Voters and Plymouth Church. And so one of the things that I was wondering is, you probably saw the article in today's paper where they were talking about the possibility of the consent decree with the DOJ. If it can be done before January 15th, would you be the monitor on that as well? And what's the progress that's being made on that?
So the answer is the current settlement agreement explicitly provides that we would be the monitor for the federal consent decree. Beyond that, we don't have any more information than you do. We're not part of the negotiations or discussions of it. So we are just where you are looking at a January, let's be honest. We know as a factual matter that the first Trump administration not only did not initiate any consent decrees, it attempted to undermine some of the ones that had been negotiated shortly before they came into office. So it's unlikely that this, if past is prologue, it's unlikely that the next administration will pursue consent decrees. That's not the only path to relief. The truth is, the mission of our group is to help communities come together on a shared plan for change, and we've done that other places. So it's not as if the federal government is the only way to do it, but it has been the leading voice. It does have the biggest stick, and we're all just waiting to see what happens. I've seen the public statements from the city that they're still committed to trying to get it done, but we truly don't know anything more than any of you know, and my guess is we probably know less than what some of you all know.
Hi, my name's Rob Plinkett, and my question is whether or not the federal investigation heading towards a consent decree, is it redundant to what the state did, or do they have a separate focus?
We really don't know. We do have some sense that it had some broader issues. There's some overlap, and that there were some additional issues that are not within the state consent decree. It's our understanding they were sort of negotiated jointly on an understanding that some of it would be in the federal consent decree, but we couldn't tell you exactly what those. I think I've really demonstrated that I can't, but I will keep trying. We know that they were doing it jointly, and there were some issues to be under the state, and some were reserved for the federal, is at least our understanding, but we couldn't tell you exactly what those are. Cookies now?
Okay.
All right.
I just really want to know where these questionnaires is really going to go. Is it really, are our voices going to be heard this time? I understand that I fill out these questionnaires, they go sit on a desk. many contracts with third-party companies coming into Minneapolis, and they still don't go anywhere. So who will be the contact person to make sure that our voices are heard in the city of Minneapolis?
Well, I will, Arlinda will. Come to our website. I assure you, this is not a questionnaire just for the exercise of a questionnaire. This is our way to get information. It is our, and we'll happy to report back to you at our next meeting what we've done with it, but our intention is by then we'll use the one about the application. We hope to have a community partner by then, and depending on the feedback we get on the Community Liaison Council, we'd move forward on that if there's support for it. So.
John Humphrey, Reimagining Community Safety. A question about what you just said about the federal government possibly not getting involved in a DOJ consent decree. Will that have any impact on your pursuing the State Department of Human Rights consent decree?
No. And it's important for people that the state consent decree has really important, it's a very comprehensive document with important changes, and that work will go forward, and there's nothing the federal government can do about it.
Thanks again. One more question about the implementation of the evaluation, and you kind of tantalize us with some measures in the handout. And I'm wondering, as Mr. Flowers stated, we're really working on eliminating a pattern or practices of racial harm in the city. And that report relied on measures. And I'm wondering if these measures that you list in any part are congruent with the Department of Human Rights measures, and we'll be able to tell specific progress given the picture presented to us in the report and where we'll be later on.
When you say the report, do you mean the Department of Human Rights report?
Yes.
So yes, I think they're congruent, but our measures are specifically tied to the requirements of the agreement, but I think the agreement reflects the findings identified in the MDHR's report. So yes, so technically ours are just tied to the agreement's requirements, but they will, I expect they would reflect the state report.
David,
and those will all be posted.
David, if I could append to that over here.
Sure.
And to be clear, the data found in MDHR's investigations, we're using that as a reference point for understanding the baseline. We're going to be doing our own independent evaluation and statistical review of whether or not there's progress that's been made after policies and training have been implemented. As David said previously, we want to make sure that we're measuring how the department is performing in a universe where their policies and training have been completed. It doesn't make sense to review them again when MDHR has already provided those findings. But it will be a very important reference point for how we compare compliance versus where we found ourselves, during the investigative process.
Because we will audit the practices. Once we have them, we actually do extensive audits and analysis of what's happening, and we'll report those results to you.
But let me just add, remember, one of the components that this settlement agreement added that's not in a number of other consent decrees is a community survey, that we are also to come back to the community and specifically ask questions about what you see as improvement. So there's a strong component in this settlement agreement that calls for not just our measurements and not just our audits, but we also have to come back and see if our audits are matching some of the things that come from the survey.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to say that I've learned a lot tonight, and I'm really impressed with the team that we have up here. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, and I feel like we have the best of the U.S. in here. I had no idea we had people from out of state, that top of the line service workers here that are representing our community here. So I'm really proud that you're part of our community. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
My question is, what is being incorporated to really encourage and uplift our officers that are working so hard at doing the right thing for our community? And how are those being measured as well?
Oh, that's a really great question. So one thing I want to say first, and we're going to get others to talk about that. I'm going to ask Chief to talk about it. I'm going to ask Julie to talk about it. The simple fact of the matter is, what the officers here are, they say, you know, we're still here. And they're here because they want to be. And we've had more than one officer actually tell us, you know, I left, I went to a suburban for more money and it was boring, and so I came back. So your police force here is committed to this city and to the work they're doing, and they are embracing this process. They have concerns about how it will affect them, absolutely, and they've been very clear. They're direct with us about those concerns, but they're also equally clear that they recognize and embrace the need for change. And it's really important that we acknowledge that and lift them up, because we need them to stay. And you all are actually facing a retirement cliff. Recruitment throughout the country of police officers is just a challenge. There isn't a police department in this country that isn't desperately searching for officers. So we got to keep the ones we have and acknowledge their service and appreciate it. It's one of the things, Julie touched on it briefly, I'm going to ask her to elaborate, but one of the, and then I'm going to ask Chief to talk about it from his perspective, but one of the things we really have asked and pushed the city to focus on is the issue of these wellness rooms and the break rooms. When you go to the department, if there's a place where, you talk about it, Julie, go ahead.
I really appreciate that question, and one of the things I'm seeing around the country is more and more of those questions, and I think there's been so much trauma, you know, over the last number of years that sometimes we forget that the police departments are experiencing trauma as well. And so thank you for that question. And you know, I think, so what many of us do when we go to different departments, we do ride-alongs with officers. And one of the things that I find so encouraging in the departments, but also I have 5 grown kids, and I think young people are looking at mental health in a very different way than my generation and older generations. And I think they're much more willing to talk about mental health. They're much more willing to address stigma, to seek out services. And I'm really encouraged by what I see around the country with that. To David's point, you know, departments have lost so many officers, and the environment in which many departments are working is just tough. It's tough on officers, it's tough on families, and most officers are here to do the right thing. So to what David was saying, in our first several months here, I toured all the districts and all of the police buildings, and it's really shameful, maybe is the right word, some of the areas of the precincts that are just terrible. Just bloody sheets in cot rooms and de-escalation spaces that are absent, mothers' rooms that are absent for, young moms who are, breastfeeding and needing to pump while they're at work, and, sitting in mechanical rooms in order to do that. And, so we're putting a lot of pressure in this first year or two on creating spaces that helps demonstrate the support that's necessary. And, many times it's can feel like lip service, and until they see it and feel it, the culture isn't going to change. So there's good surveys that are being put out, getting feedback. Specifically, Wellness Unit is spending time in the precincts talking to folks. And so I'm encouraged. We're very early here, very early, and there is a lot to be done in terms of changing the culture around it. But I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing so far, within the wellness unit, and so forth. We've got to do up and down the chain of command, right? It has to be permeating the department, and it's not right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. I spent a considerable amount of time going to meet officers, supervisors, commanders, the executive team, and even meeting with the chief. Here's what I'll say. Here are the 4 things that make people come to an organization, stay in an organization, or decide whether they want to leave. And it's not just policing, it's every organization, private and public sector. Working conditions, upward mobility, fair and equity in the selection and promotion process, and then pay. All of those are important, but working conditions are far more important than all of the others. And officers internalize how communities and the city government feels about them by their working conditions. And what they want more than anything else is to feel appreciated and not feel like, like they got to bring a hammer and nails to work to hold the buildings up. They're doing hard work. And like David said, like Julie said, the ones who are here tell me every time, I'm here because I want to be here, in spite of it all. And officers are, and I was one for 33 years, we are our best recruiters. We either go out and tell other people about the job we do and try to entice them to come join our ranks, or we're telling them, you don't want to come here. And so the thing we want to do is have the officers here not do that. And so much of what I'm doing is trying to socialize with them that this settlement agreement is a tool to help them become a good department and to help them realize that what you're now learning, what we're teaching, and what these reforms make you do are not new. There are really good departments around America who have been doing this for years, decades for some. And just because you didn't know about these best practices doesn't mean that we're making you do something. We're not handcuffing you. We're not tying your hands behind your back. You can still do your job. By the way, here are the other agencies that are doing it well, that were just where you are and have overcome it. And there's hope. And so part of what I want to do is bring them hope and show them how what they're going through, other departments have been through it, they've gotten over it, they've gotten better, and here's what your future can look like. Stay the course. Stay the course. And make sure that the chief, the executives, and how decisions get made are made fairly, justly, equitably, and point to the work that's being done that they made, because they're in a bubble here in Minneapolis, and if they don't know what's happening in a city that's doing it well, they will think that we've done it this way, we've always done it this way, it's the right way. Well, it's not. There's a better way. And what we don't want them to hear is, yes, you're in a settlement agreement. You may be in a consent decree. It doesn't mean you were a bad department. It means that structure was not there for you to have good policies, good training, supervision, management, and discipline. Now we're creating that structure for you to have that so you can be a good department, and then we're showing them, look at what you're doing. So yes, you're doing good work. Complaints are coming down. All of the above is happening. And yes, you're doing it with fewer people. And I think a lot should be said that Minneapolis Police Department is doing the work with 500 or less than it used to do with 800. And so we can never really lose sight of that. But that's a great question, and I'm glad there's so much to say and we can't say it all in one night.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I do want to express my appreciation for ELEFA being out, and I'm glad that you opened this up to public input. I think the press release that went out was disingenuous and not to your service. And I hope the next time that you will include that there will be public input, there will be public comment, because we are, as you say in your materials, the key role for this to work. I do want to say one thing about the Community Commission on Police Oversight, for which I serve as a commissioner. I'm Stacy Gurian Sherman in Ward 9, and I see many of my colleagues here today, and I want to acknowledge them for coming out in the service that they do for a really hard job, because we're not only tasked with the only entity in the city to oversee police misconduct cases, but policy. So it's incredibly disturbing to me that the mandate in the ordinance for the city that requires us to review policy within 120 days is absent in any mention on your slides or discussion. Chief Harrison talked about Baltimore and New Orleans becoming self-sufficient and self-correcting, and yet there is absolutely no contact with the CCPO. We are going to be the ones that are left in 20 years or so. I won't be here doing it, and I'm sure the people in this room won't be. Hopefully there will be a resident oversight. But to go through the policy review you're doing now and saying, we can't do anything with you because we have to stick to the four corners of the settlement, when the settlement agreement did in fact create this entity. We do have a local ordinance that mandates that we review policy. I and others on the commission have brought up the need to coordinate that 120 days with the 45 days months ago, and we are no further along. We thought ELEFA would be part of that, and we're just not hearing anything. I also want to point out that yesterday the City Council passed unanimously a move to vote tomorrow on a legislative directive that would require the mayor to give more information about the role of ELEFA and the two, not one, but two implementation teams, one from the city attorney's office and one from the police department, because they have been getting word from people that people do not really understand what your role is, especially when it comes to police misconduct. There wasn't one bit of data that you reported on our cases, whether we are seeing how many are going through intake, how many are being investigated, how many have been cleared, and the still terribly long wait to see what the final conclusion is. So I need to see, and I hope you'll have an answer for this tomorrow night, and I certainly hope you'll have more of an answer in March, when you'll have been here a year. What is your role with the CCPO, and how are you going to work with that entity, which is the only entity that sees police misconduct cases, because that is a key to our moving forward and our sustainability. I don't expect you to have the answers now, but I would really like to see a much thorough and much more inclusive information on that come March. Thank you.
A perfectly fair request. We have done some work to help the CCPO get input into the policy process. The answers, the worst answers we have to give are answers that we don't have authority to do something, but it doesn't mean we can't engage with the city and MPD about encouraging them to do that stuff, to do other things beyond the agreement, which we do all the time. So we are very sensitive to that issue, and we're continuing to work on it, and we'll report to you more on it. And you're right about the press release. We actually didn't catch that line when we reviewed it as it was going out, but we later learned it was a mistake, and I actually got permission to do a couple of TV interviews a little bit late to say, no, we are going to take questions and take feedback, and we will at every one of these meetings.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. The officer wellness is really, really needed. Thank you so much for presenting on that. My question goes to Lisa. So Lisa, how do we see Minneapolis is a diverse community that has different needs, especially when it comes to cultural specificness. How do we see incorporating those policies in a culturally specific ways that caters for people's need? Also, on the public comment side, there's a lot of technology barriers when it comes to giving feedback. Do we incorporate or bring other voices to the table to bring their comments into those policies that are being implemented by the MPD? Thank you.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand the technological barriers for people to provide feedback through the website. And that's simply like being able to navigate the website, and are you also talking about cultural in terms of language and other concerns? Yeah.
John, can you give me the microphone?
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really helpful piece of feedback. The website being the city's website is perhaps not the most user-friendly, but it is something. And I think it's helpful to know that people are having a hard time using the website, so that isn't the only way for MPD to be able to elicit that feedback. I think that knowing that helps us as monitors who are attempting to get feedback, as well as the city and MPD, who are kind of the main drivers of the policy creation and feedback process, that they need to perhaps give additional methods for people to provide feedback. The public feedback sessions that they had last year, I mean, it was before we were here, so I'm not exactly sure how well those were advertised. I do know that they had some culturally specific sessions. I would hope that there might be other opportunities, and I know that there are city folks in the room who are also hearing this feedback, that there might be additional ways to reach out to those communities where the website and/or giving feedback on the internet isn't properly, or isn't enough, basically. And in terms of the policies being culturally specific, that is a really good question, and I think that that's where the public feedback process is so essential, so ensuring that the community, those who are representing a diverse culture that feels like, okay, that policy might work for certain communities, but it's not gonna work for us, and this is why, has the ability to weigh in a meaningful way. So we're taking notes, and I would love to chat with you after a little further to get your contact information and see if there are more creative ways to be able to provide that opportunity for feedback in a more inclusive way.
Yeah, and that's really critical. Sorry, that's really critical right now because the non-discriminatory policing policies are up for review right now. So like that goes right to the core issue you just described. So it's very important that we get that feedback in whatever form. Like I said, if you come talk to Lisa, we'll try to get that feedback from you directly, but if there are others that you could point us in the direction of, that would be helpful because we're trying to make sure we're having no wrong door to be able to get this information in.
Hi, my name's Chuck. I'm not sure about this comment, but that's never stopped me before. About the policies, I appreciate when I heard it mentioned that we want clear and concise policies. Currently, the Minneapolis Police Department's Policy and Procedure Manual, which I don't think is unusual in this respect, has over 600 pages in it. I think if you have a manual with over 600 pages in it, you don't have a manual that you can really hold officers accountable to. When I was in high school, I went to North High School in Minneapolis. Our principal, Chester M. Johnson, said at every assembly, I have 2 rules: be where you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to be doing. I think it's somewhere in between 600 pages and those 2 rules. But I would like to see the manual really decrease in size. I think I looked at it about 15, 20 years ago, and it was 300 pages. Every time we have police reform, the manual gets bigger and bigger. Along that line, I'm not sure if we have good, concise policies, and we train officers in those policies, and we hold them accountable, presumably we're going to change police behavior. But we also hear about police culture. And I didn't see a lot in the settlement agreement about what is police culture, how we measure it, if changing behavior is enough to change police culture. So I'd like to hear any comments you have about that. We heard a lot about the police culture, specifically at the 3rd precinct after the killing of George Floyd, even from supervisors at that precinct.
First of all, that's a great observation. The easiest of all things to do for someone who's done it for 33 years is to write something down. Culture is the hardest of all things to change because it is changing how we think about what we do. Much of what this settlement agreement makes the Minneapolis Police Department do is unlearn the way they learned it and the way they did it, teach them the new way, and then now hold them accountable for the new way. For your more seasoned officers, trying to unlearn something that you learned and was reinforced for years and maybe decades is very, very hard. And so it takes time. The 5 areas that have to be addressed, I will say, in every police department is policy, training, supervision, management, and discipline. If you have a positive effect in course correcting all of those so that all of them are national best practices, your policies, your training, your supervision, management, and discipline, what supervision really is instead of what some think it is, then you will see culture change because officers will think differently about the jobs they do. Supervisors will think differently about what supervision really means. Managers will think differently about what management really is. Right, or we will get somebody who does understand what it really is. And then all of us have to understand what accountability is through discipline and through training. It's not just discipline, but it's a combination of both. And the settlement agreement touches on all of those buckets. And so over time, when they are all addressed, and then the entire department is operating in a new way in all of those areas, you should see culture change in departments performing in a way that you heard me say earlier, builds relationships that were never built and repairs relationships that were broken. But it takes time.
When we were working with, when I was working with the chief in New Orleans, he often didn't really talk a lot about the consent decree. He talked about what they were doing because that's who they were. And he talked a lot about the new culture at NOPD. So culture is kind of a component of 2 things. It's formal and informal rules. So we're working on the formal rules. But as people adopt those rules and internalize those rules will drive a new culture. But the key to it is to do it not because they have to, but because that's who they are. And we will get to that point, I believe, with this department, and that was what the chief was able to do in both New Orleans and Baltimore, get people to understand we are doing this because we want to be the best at what we do. Yes, ma'am, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. I think it's important for the audience to note, too, that the CC, the Community Commission of Oversight, is that what it's called, Eileen? Are comprised of appointees from the city council. So they're wonderful, hardworking citizens, but they're not experts in all these fields like we see up here on the stage. So I really am grateful that the city's taken it a step further and really got some dynamite individuals that are real experts in their field and have an intimate role in our oversight and reform in our city. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. The amount of training that we have to go through is enormous. I've seen my colleagues take on studying the policy and procedures in jurisdictions all over the country, spending enormous amount of hours, and they are now subject matter experts after 16 and 18 months. We all come in with our skill sets and our commitments, and I don't know if I've ever worked with a more dedicated group of people. We certainly have our disagreements, and they can be very pointed at times, but I, for one, will never fault them on not having the knowledge to come into this. And I would say the mayor also appoints 2 of those people, and I would say that last year when I was appointed, there were some 600 people applying. This year there wasn't even a process for doing it. I would encourage people in this room to go on site and look at the vacancies and see if you're willing to work on this. It is needed, and you know, whether we have the same expertise as these notable people on the stage, we are it. That's it. We are the only people that the city of Minneapolis has right now. So I think it's really important to understand just how hardworking it is, and we have way more than the time permits us to do. And that is a problem that ELEFA should be looking into. We cannot possibly carry out our policy and oversight function and our case review function. We are actually an amalgam of two separate entities that was merged into one, and we don't get any more hours. We meet once a month. And so there's hardly the time to do the work, and in between, we're doing the case panels. So again, I'm going to really keep putting pressure on ELEFA now and as long as I'm in this city. You need to really figure out how police oversight is going to work so that we can have a sustainable police oversight. We already have a lot of problems and they haven't been solved. And if ELEFA isn't going to get involved in solving them, then we're going to have to look to other ways to get it done because it's not working the way it is.
Yeah. Hello, thank you. I just want to reiterate what Commissioner Sherman said. I'm LaTanya Reeves, Chair of CCPO, and so I really appreciate hearing all the comments in the room. I think it's very important that I hear what everyone is saying in regards to this work. I will say the commissioners do work very, very hard to make sure that they're looking at policy. I, for one, have read consent decrees in 5 cities. It is a lot of work to be on CCPO. It's almost a full-time job in terms of the amount of reading. I feel like I'm back in graduate school again. And so I just want to say kudos to those that sit on this committee because it's not just going to that meeting one time per month. You're actually reading hundreds, if you can imagine one file that has 30 body-worn camera videos in 1,000 pages. You have to review all of that before you go to a panel. And you do hours and hours and hours of training. So I just want to say kudos to all the commissioners in the room. I see several of them. I do look forward to seeing how we're going to work with you all in terms of what CCPO will be doing. We do have some dedicated folks on here that want to see this work very well. We do have, like she said, do we have an opening in one of the wards, so please go on the website. But just kudos to the commissioners, and it is a lot of work, but we do want to work with you. We want to make sure that we're doing this the right way in terms of community engagement. We do have 2 committees. We have police policy and research and community engagement. And so they are open to the public, and they meet once per month. We encourage community to come out and come to those committee meetings. Here we're talking about in terms of policy, what policies are being reviewed, have your input on those policies in that space. There's lots of opportunities for you guys to get involved. So please don't sit out. Please make your voices heard. If you can't come, send an email. We all got emails on the website. It's important that we all engage in this because we're all community. We're not just people that just flew out the sky. We're all Minneapolis residents that want to see this be well and be safe for everyone. And so please just get involved, and I'm encouraged by what you guys are doing. So thank you.
And
I want to,
reviewing these policies is a lot of work.
Yeah.
We hear you on that, and you are volunteers doing that, and so it is, right, it's a heavy lift.
yeah, I wanted to add too, because what Ms. Sherman was saying, we've seen the same thing, just the amount of commitment from the CCPO members. And part of what ELEFA has been saying from the beginning is that we want to see this work continue. What the settlement agreement does is just really the floor. It's the beginning of building systems. What is going to sustain the reforms in Minneapolis is having a CCPO, an entity like that, with the appropriate resources and ability to maintain the things that we're doing. So part of the reason we wanted to do some of the education is to make sure we pass on some of the education from what we have here and to make sure that is sustained. So we agree and have been having many conversations. Ms. Sherman, we have been involved in terms of have been meeting with your policy team and are continuing to try to do that work. So we want to keep pushing and expanding and make sure that we can leave an entity like CCPO with all of the things that it needs. And I know Michelle Phillips, the Human Rights Director, is also working very hard to make sure we make some reforms in that area.
We are at 8 o'clock. We can take 1 or maybe 2 more, and then, cookies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Stewart. I represent Agape Movement, which is just located here on 38th in Chicago. We are the team that shut down that intersection. We are also the team that opened that intersection. I also do sit on CCPO as well. I do believe that it's not just the responsibility of ELEFA I'm going to say this to you all as community members. It is your responsibility. You have to take part in everything that is committed to your well-being and your neighbor's well-being. We did a focus group with Minneapolis police officers. 3 of the things that we heard from MPD: policies are too long and confusing, leading for them to be misunderstood. Officers desire a more integrated, reality-based, scenario-based training. They suggest doing training with community members so community members can get an understanding what it's like to have to make a split-second decision in order for them to go home to their loved ones, the same way that they want to protect and serve us so that we can go home to our loved ones. Community, I stand here actually sitting, but I beg of you to reach out. When you see that officer, if you're on 10, imagine that that officer is on 100. We have to work together. We are year 4, going into year 5, post George Floyd. Being at a conference last month that every state and 6 countries were represented, and we heard from many people from all different forms of law enforcement. Every last one of them spoke upon how they have moved their law enforcement agencies forward since George Floyd. You know what the common thread was? Community came together and said, we're here. Because guess what? They are a part of our community. They work in our community. Some of them live in our community, and a lot of them play and entertain in our community. It is time for us to start giving agape love, which is unconditional love. The biggest thing God has ever told us, whatever religion you come from, whether you believe or not believe, you were told as a child, treat others the way you would like to be treated. Let's go back to the basics, because we have no idea what the next 4 years are going to look like. We're going to need each other. Community, stand up.
Woo woo. And we are giving you the last word. So thank you all for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. All right, thank you.